Hi, welcome to Prime. I'm Emily Hargrove.
And I'm Ashley Wessel, and we have a very special show for you today. Later, we'll hear about the Addison Rotary Open and how they're helping the Ronald McDonald House charities and how you can get involved.
But first, the story of Honor Flight. Our veterans literally are the backbone of our country, and they should be treated as such. We have a very special organization with us today, Honor Flight, who helps all the veterans go to Washington, D.C. to visit the War Memorial. And we are here with Tudy Giordano, the president of DFW Honor Flight, and Mr. Charles Alford, a World War II veteran, to tell us all about this incredible organization. So both of you, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
It's a real pleasure to have you, because what you do for the veterans with Honor Flight is extraordinary, and it's an all-volunteer organization.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
So tell us about the history of Honor Flight. How did it come about?
Honor Flight came about as a need to take our older veterans to Washington to see the memorial. The memorial wasn't dedicated until 2004. And if you think about that, 60 years later, these gentlemen were in their late 70s to 90s. And a physician's assistant kept asking his patients, have you seen the memorial? Have you seen the memorial? They hadn't, and the reason they hadn't is they didn't have the means to get there, either financially or they couldn't go by themselves. So he saw that need is to take these veterans, and so he took a private jet and flew some veterans to Washington, and it just kind of blossomed from there. It's been a grassroots effort. There are hubs all over the country, and DFW happens to be one of them.
Well, it's such an important mission, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what's the process for getting on the flight? What do, veterans or family members that are helping, how do they, get on the list?
They apply. We have a forum online. If you go to Honor Flight DFW and go to the forums tab on that, you will find a veterans application, you apply, and then you go onto the waiting list, and as funds become available, that's how we work through the list.
So there is a waiting list?
Yes, ma'am, there is.
And how long on average? Mr. Alford, how long did you have to wait before you...
Well, it took me about a year after I called them and got on the list, and I'd about given up on it until I read an article about an Honor Flight coming back about a year later, and I thought, well, they must have lost my application. I was thinking of calling them when Tudy called me. She said to see if I was still interested. That's what she told me, and I assumed that was the right reason. There may have been another one to see if I was still kicking. At any rate, I said yes, and so I got on the next, I guess it was the next one, October.
Yes, it was.
And when they talked about guardians to go with everybody, well, we met, all of the prospective travelers met at C.C. Young, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And brought our wives and met everybody, and they had a bunch of these guardians who, in many cases, were relatives of the person going. In my case, my son lives in Waco, and he was interested in being a guardian, and so I got a hold of Tudy, and they said, yeah, he could go. Of course, the guardians pay their own way.
Right.
It's just old geezers like me that they...
You're not old.
So it's all donations. I think that's an important thing to get across, is that every single flight is funded by donations from the public.
Yes. And as
They wouldn't let us take a dime. They said, you don't even buy Cokes.
Well, no, you should.
No,
Absolutely.
We drank a lot of bottled water.
We did.
That's so the more donations you get, then the more flights that you can operate.
Absolutely. Our flight capacity is limited by the funds that we get donated.
So on average, how many trips go out a year?
This past year, for 2012, we would have taken 3 flights out, and our flight usually consists of about 40. We were prepared to take more flights out, but the funding wasn't there to take the 3rd flight out.
Right, so 40 at a time.
Correct.
So that's a great group of veterans all heading to D.C. I bet it's a party, isn't it?
Well, you say 40, you're not counting the guardians.
No, no.
So there's about 80 people.
Oh, wow, that's
a plain load of people usually.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty close.
And it is quite a party, don't you think?
Yes, it is.
So tell us about your experience with your flight. when you went? You said you went on flight 4?
Yeah, when we got to the airport at DFW, there was a great crowd of people out there greeting us, all these old guys, including young military applicants at one station. Maybe that was in Washington. Anyway, there was a group of young kids that had already enlisted in the military that met the flight. And I don't know whether they were going to camp or what, but we were just astounded at all the people. They even had a re-enlistment.
That's right.
In Washington.
Your flight did.
There was a Navy guy who wanted to re-enlist after 20 years or so, and so they had a ceremony out there for them. Then they took us to we went to, because we got there, when did we get there? Noon or 3, 1 or
About
something?
noonish.
About noon. We went to 3 or 4 of the memorials, like Korea, Vietnam, what else did we go to? Air Force, Navy, and we took about 3 of them that afternoon. Then we went to a hotel, had a big dinner, and next day we took a trip around 3 more, mainly the World War II memorial, I think, because that takes a lot of time.
I bet.
Sure.
It's a big exposure.
So you go out to the Arlington.
Oh yeah.
We did.
Cemetery.
We the changing of the guard, and
Wonderful.
Oh yeah.
and if we're lucky enough,
Arlington.
4 of our veterans are able to lay the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and participate in that
that's
ceremony.
Very
Wow.
special.
It is. It's a
Do you have to apply for that in advance?
We do.
Right.
We do, and it just depends on who's applied and who's. They're very accommodating to the World War II veterans. That's who they really enjoy having lay the wreath.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
The unknown soldier thing is a deal everybody ought to go to anyway,
Absolutely.
just because of the commitment of those troops.
Yes. Yeah, and you served from June 44, is that correct? When did you go out to Europe?
When did I go to
When did
Europe?
you go to Europe when you were serving in the war?
Well, I landed at Omaha Beach, but at that time they had big quays built out there of sunken ships, so we had to walk about 1.5 miles to get on shore. Wow. But and then we moved forward as a replacement. They had what they called a replacement depot, and it was a group of soldiers ready to be placed someplace as people got killed and wounded, and then we called them the Repel Depot. We just followed the war along until they called your number. And I don't remember, I guess it was July or August, when they sent me to an armored division, which I'd never served in before. I thought, oh my gosh, what am I getting into? But it turned out to be the best thing for me to be in. I like all that steel and firepower. And we had plenty of that.
I bet, yeah.
Stayed with that division until the war ended. Then they disbanded it over in the Eastern Front, and I didn't have enough points to come home, so they transferred me to the 2nd Armored Division, and I went to Berlin with them. They were the first troops in Berlin, and came home with them in February of 46.
So you're there for a year and a half.
And a year and a half over there, and then ended up at Fort Hood.
Oh, just
And I grew up in Chicago, and I wasn't going back there, so I ended up in Dallas, as far north as I got.
well, we're glad to have you here.
Yeah.
So now, do you still keep in touch with some of your war buddies?
We had a divisional organization, 6th Armored Division Association. I didn't know about it until 1980, and I had written to Washington to find out if there was a history of the 6th Armored. They referred me to the secretary of this association, and they had contracted with a writer, Hoffman was his name, who was doing a story of the 6th Armored. And he said, why don't you come to our meeting? Well, I didn't know they had meetings. And they were going to Las Vegas that year, of all the places to go on your first trip. So I joined the organization and went to all their reunions until they quit in 1999, I think.
Well, so that's what's so great also about On a Flight is that you not only go see the war memorials, but you have time to talk to, you know, your peers and share experiences, memories.
Oh yeah.
On a trip like this.
Yeah.
I think it means a lot to the veterans to be able to go there with other veterans. Again, it was built so late in life that there aren't a lot of these guys left around.
And a lot of them weren't able to go with their own families. I could have gone in 04, but I chose not to because I didn't think sitting in a movie theater watching what's going on would appeal to me particularly. And my wife couldn't walk down there on the mall because that's a big place.
It is.
And so I canceled.
And speaking of that, you know, since this population ages, one special thing to remember with the honor flight is you have a health crew that comes along as well to help with anything that could possibly
Absolutely.
arise. So.
Oh yeah.
We're very blessed. We have volunteers, physicians, respiratory therapists, nurses, occupational therapists that travel along with us. Several from the medical team say that we're like a traveling hospital, and actually we really are. We're ready for anything.
Because you're a registered nurse, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
So it's so important to have that.
You need those extra eyes because they can be slippery little guys. Keeping up with them can be a challenge.
I tell you, the guys going on the flight, they don't have to worry in the world. Everything's taken care of. It's a marvelous organization.
And that is how it should be.
True.
Absolutely.
It's hard to realize. Excuse me.
Oh, you're good.
I think I'm melting.
So it's hot. It's a summertime in Dallas, so it is hot.
Yeah, it is. It? Okay.
So the future of honor flight, where do you see it going? What's the next steps, or what's your vision for it?
Well, hopefully our vision is to get all the World War II veterans there before.
Until we've all croaked and gone away.
Right. Our window of time is shutting, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
After the World War II veterans, we'll move on to the rest of the veterans, Korean War.
Okay. So.
And if you think about the Korean veterans, those folks are in their 70s and 80s as well.
Yeah.
And then the Vietnam veterans. So we'll keep on moving through the veterans.
Till you run out of money.
Till we run out of money.
Which hopefully that never happens.
And before we wrap up, there's a very important program you've got going on, Adopt a Veteran, right now. So this is, for anybody that wants to get involved, you can go to the honorflightdfw.org site, and then you can, the veterans that are on the waiting list, they are.
We've had veterans that have volunteered to serve as kind of like a poster person for our veterans. They have not flown, and you can read their history on the back of the card. It tells a little bit about each other, and it also tells you about how to donate funding.
Well, yeah, because when I went on there, I literally wanted to adopt everybody. I was like, oh gosh, if only I could. So you adopt that. If you adopt that veteran, then they will
get to go.
They will get to go.
They represent the waiting list. So some of these, it's not specifically for that veteran, but for the 400 on the waiting list.
Well, both of you, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
It is such a true pleasure to have you, and good luck with Honor Flight.
Thank you.
And Mr. Alford, we hope to see you again, and tell us about your other endeavors.
Well, I don't know how many years I've got left.
Come back and see us again sometime. But thank you. Please go and see honorflightdfw.org. It is a really incredible organization. We'll be right back.